Mastery is personal. The difficulty is that to get teachers to do these better things, you have to ask them to stop doing a good thing. School originally, historically, was set up as if it was a place of work.
Richard Wells is deputy principal in New Zealand, and he was ranked twice in the top 20 most influential educators for global educational technology use.
Yeah, it all centers on teaching skill and the toolkit that a teacher has and the habits and the approaches and mindsets of a teacher that make the real difference. By opening yourself up like that to a class, you do get a lot more buy-in. They feel like you actually are much more authentic, much more genuinely interested in their success because you want their feedback to build a better classroom.
Richard, thank you so much for accepting the invitation and joining this conversation today.
No worries. Very happy to be here. Kia ora from New Zealand.
Yeah, and I'm really, really curious to see what the education landscape looks like in New Zealand. So I'm all ears now to hear, first of all, what made you become an educator in the first place? When was that spark ignited?
Okay, so I've got a very mixed history. I'm a fine art grad turned computer engineer. Turned as a child, as a teenager, I was a magician. I'm a musician. I'm a lead singer in a band, so I'm sort of a bit of a jack of all trades. And so, as growing up, a lot of adults around me, with my magic shows, whatever it is, would talk about me. Hey, probably becoming a teacher. It didn't happen immediately. I became that computer engineer and ended up, my computer firm ended up getting a huge contract to, in the late 90s to network about 500 schools in the UK when they had a huge government funding for IT. And so I ended up going to schools and setting them up for that and setting up their networks. And I went to one school, and the principal, I'd fixed a lot of their problems, and other engineers hadn't managed to do so. So the principal essentially didn't let me leave, and said, I'll double your salary. Can you please stay? Because there aren't many people who can fix IT problems like you can. So it was early in my career, so that sounded pretty good. So I took the job on, started working and carrying on setting up all the tech in the school. Once that was all set up, it was all running smoothly. I didn't really do much, so I ended up sort of helping kids, and then I got noticed that I was, almost teaching kids and spending a lot of time just helping people out. And so the principal ended up just saying, "Hey, why don't we can carry on with your salary, and there's a UK, teacher graduate program. We can put you on that, and you could train to be a teacher." So I sort of literally very much drifted and stepped sideways into teaching. Haven't looked back. So yeah, big combination of all sorts of things. I've taught almost everything in schools. As a deputy principal now, I quite often get asked to fill in random bits of the timetable. I'm teaching art this year. It's the first time in 22 years of teaching that I'm actually teaching my along with my aligned with my fine art degree. So that's exciting. So here I am, and my story to why I'm on this podcast and what I've done over the last sort of 10 years started with the launch of the iPad. I was late to the sort of ed tech circus. I wasn't one of the super early adopters, and but sort of joined around 2011, 2012. Started writing online about iPad use, and as lots of people did. And like a lot of those ed techers, or certainly the early adopters, around 2016, 17, started to sort of realize that ed tech wasn't the solution to everything, and focus much more on the general purpose of school and learning it, and sort of the true nature of learning and stuff. So.
And do you see a shift now moving away from technology, too much technology? Was it ever too much in class? And are we moving away from that now?
I think you can see online it's being challenged. You can also, in terms of the people I'm referencing, like Will Richardson, and there's a guy in New Zealand called Derek Wenroth. They all went through that same journey of getting in the 2000s, getting really excited about what technology was going to do for education. And then by the time you get to sort of 2016, 17, there's a realization that actually that's a distraction from probably what we should be talking about, which is more about the nature of schools and the nature of learning, particularly in the sort of more complex modern era. So yeah, I've been on that same journey, and there are lots of people in the States, particularly in the States, where there's a lot of money being made, who are still on that edtech bandwagon. And it's fair play to them. They're doing really well and helping a lot of people with playing with lots of tools. But I think it becomes an alternative approach rather than maybe a better approach. Yeah. So I'm much more cautious about technology these days.
Yeah. And what struggles did you face along the way to come to the conclusion that technology is a distraction more than a tool?
Simply results, really. It's quite simple. When you look at you can look at America and the UK and New Zealand and Australia. The final results, the outcomes, whether you're looking at just school national exams or you're looking at PISA or whatever, there's a flat line, and you can visit most schools in New Zealand, it's what's really interesting is that you can see that these things are a distraction, because across the last decade you'll find that most schools, probably globally, and certainly I know of examples in New Zealand, where the success rate of the actual final outcomes have flatlined for 10 years, regardless of technology introduction, technology removal, different pedagogies, different governments, lots of this huge change in different countries, huge change. But actually, if you take a particular school, you'll more often than not find that nothing's changed. And so the realization, and you see more and more of the sort of those early adopters now discussing, is that we have John Hattie in Australia. He's a Kiwi who works in Australia and does a lot of that meta analysis of what really does and doesn't work, and it all centers on teaching skill and the toolkit that a teacher has, and the habits and the approaches and mindsets of a teacher that make the real difference. Ed tech or no ed tech. And I've got examples of that, in the last couple of years that we've been experimenting with, and where it's clear that it's just down to how the teacher thinks, and how the teacher acts, more importantly. That's what really makes a difference.
And I guess it wasn't only the research that you read from outside sources, but also your own research in your school and your observations in the school you're leading, right?
Yeah, we've done a lot of work in my school on it. We've got a group working on it next year, in terms of looking at really one of the real challenges, it's said by others, like Dylan William in the UK, around teaching globally, is that most of what teachers do is not harmful. Everything we do is at least slightly helpful. It's a good thing to do. But we could do, for everything that we do, there is a better alternative, an alternative that would have more impact on students and motivate them more and get better outcomes. And the difficulty is that to get teachers to do these better things, you have to ask them to stop doing a good thing. So that becomes the global challenge in education around these, particularly those long-standing habits that we have. And what's really interesting, because I do a lot of reading and a lot of this sort of online connection and chat and stuff, is that there is a bizarre alignment, dare I say it, between the progressives, as you might call them, and the conservatives.
Mm.
I would definitely put myself in the sort of category of progressive. I like to really push things and do things differently. But at the same time, I can read a post by, Greg Ashman in Australia, a British math teacher working in Australia. And he would probably count himself as a science of learning traditionalist, I think, and is quite proud of that and says it works. And I've I've commented on his stuff recently, saying there's actual alignment particularly around the need for teacher training, because basically around the world, a lot of the traditional stuff, equally as much as the progressive stuff, project-based learning and things, it has a tendency to, sadly, mostly fail is a strong word, but essentially mostly not really make a mark. And it's because the teachers, in their defense, don't have enough time, as it were, to really look into the ins and outs of how to make these things work. And that's the same for something highly traditional, lecturing from the front, as it is something more progressive, personalized, project-based learning. And so it comes down to what really makes a difference, a lot more than EdTech, is really working on that understanding and that skill of how to make these things work.
And the metaphor I like to use on that is, we would never allow a car mechanic to add the new parts in our car without removing the old parts. We would never allow that and say, okay, go ahead. I vouch for that. But we do that with our teaching practices. Without removing the old parts, we are trying to merge into the new ones, and it doesn't work because we haven't removed what was not working in the first place. Maybe. And so from these new practices that you are now promoting, and what is one practice that you think that if a teacher applies, they're going to be successful, not only to survive in class, but also to thrive? Is there like one tip you can give to an educator?
I've got a terrible, as a lot of people do, I have a terrible history of desperately trying to find a silver bullet.
Yeah.
And of course you realize that there isn't a silver bullet, but if I was gonna, my current interest, and again, I'm working in as a leader in a school, I'm trying to to some extent trying to keep everyone happy and trying to keep everyone on board and bring everyone along. And so I quite often gravitate now towards ideas and actions that sort of sit in the middle. Might attract everyone for different reasons. And so my current one, and it sits in that kind of conservative science of learning stuff, is deliberate practice, and how with a little progressive slant on it. I like to think of it as mastery being, and conservatives love the word mastery. You can find a good math teacher and music teacher, and they'll love the word mastery because they appreciate that, particularly in their fields, there's a definite progression of steps that you need to go through to master an instrument or master maths. You've got to be good at number before you can do measurement. So it's quite attractive for that. But I put a progressive slant on it by saying, by making them realize that mastery is a wonderfully organized way of looking at it, but mastery is personal. And so what I'm experimenting in my school with, and some other teachers are taking it on board, is this idea that every student it makes only sense that every student works at their level, works on their current, highest quality output, and preferably in small chunks, so that we can more rapidly cycle and rapidly review before they move on to another iteration. And so that real sense of mastery and deliberate practice, where you do something small. I teach art this year, so I'm purposefully asking my students to do small drawings, so that we can get it done quickly. They're not taking too long on a drawing. We do a small drawing. We analyze it. I give feed forward what you're going to do now. So there's a distinct difference between feedback, commenting and criticizing what's being done, and feed forward, where you only focus on future actions. So we feed forward onto what you're going to do now, or what you're going to do on your next drawing, your next iteration. And by doing that, every student feels like they're working at their right level. Every student is motivated because it feels personal. This is actually my program. This is my learning. And I'm finding from this year's examples and feedback from other teachers that yes, it's amazing how without any gadgets and no ed tech, the seeing and feeling I'm making progress, you know, and I can see it and feel it. That's all the motivation you need.
Yeah.
And it's rare, and I have to say, I will admit that it is sadly rare in my career as a teacher that I can get, classes cheering when I walk in, or like happened the other day, or a seriously positive vibe where students think that I really care about who they are, because they're making decisions about their own personal steps. But at the same time, there is a high demand and a high expectation to continuously raise the quality. So we don't allow we don't allow straightforward repeats. We don't allow copying each other. Like in our art program, no students allowed to just do the same thing as their friend. It has to be something they genuinely are interested in, and it's got to be absolutely their own. So personalized, as mastery really should be. I'm finding that personalized mastery is a nice way of keeping lots of different types of teachers happy and interested in looking into that. And it's all part of my main focus, which has always driven me in education, which is the universal knowledge that sadly, for 80 years of public high school, most students, as we know, would rather not go to school. So what I'm passionate about, and I think I've always been, with my computer engineering and even my art, you might say, I've always been a problem solver. I think I've always seen a problem and naturally wanted to sort it out.
Sort it out. Yes. I think your inquisitive mind and your quest to find the silver bullet maybe has awakened the quest in other people as well, in the teachers you're working with or in the students you're working with. And this distinction you made between feedback and feed forward, like forget what you've done, let's see what is the next step going to be. This is really like it warms my heart, because there are people who are looking beyond what's already happening, and like this quest has given you the answers.
Yes, it certainly has. It's been a big year for me, and for others. It has required, like I say, it's required to put a bit of a hold on some other normal habits. Another thing Dylan William will talk about is the difficulty with your organized curriculum of topics that you'll have in a high school subject, and how too often in high schools around the world, you'll do a topic, it will have an outcome, and then you'll start the next topic, and that will have a separate outcome. And what gets lost and isn't felt or seen by the students is a sense of continuous growth, or I know I'm actually getting better. And the reality is, for most teachers, I think, is that that is that an average student will do topic 1 in an average way, and then we'll start topic 2 and do it in an average way. And a high performing student will do a high performing topic 1 and a high performing topic 2. But both students won't necessarily feel any progress. They're just jumping through the hoops. And so he talks about the need for very careful planning, where you cover curriculum, but at the same time be mindful of the things that students can see across those topics, and where you might even feel that the outcome of topic 2 you can discuss as being a higher quality because we did topic 1. So what can be taken from one to the other? Because Dylan William points out that too often you just go around in circles and you don't move forward. You don't take things from previous assignments and make a thing of it being improving the following assignments. So so in this new approach, this mastery approach, I've had to pull back on a focus on just ticking boxes with those different topics and those things, on the grounds that when a student is ready for that kind of material, then that's when we will look at it. I've even allowed flexibility to say, look, it's there. These other things are available. So if you're interested, then let's give it a go. But I kind of want that authentic buy-in. But like I've posted recently, the results are when you're working on the simple idea that the next thing you do is going to be higher quality than the current thing. The result we can see proof, and I've had reaction from teachers in the school that the rapid development is quite remarkable. It's just like the worst, as I've been posting recently, the what would be called the very worst students starting with an absolute zero attitude and ending with like in a 10-week phase, ending with being my ideal students and asking constant questions like, should I do this now? Should I do this now? What should I work on there? Because as I say, that sense of that fairly rare sense of I'm actually making progress here pretty rapidly is intrinsically motivating. So I'm just trying to do everything I can to make them want to be in lessons.
And this is the fact that you're saying we are making progress anyway. It's like programming them to see the progress.
It's all I'm focused on. It's all we talk about. If I use slides to teach from, they're often built from photographs of student work. And I'm literally saying I'm showcasing a student in the room, not with a piece of work that I like, but with the fact that their work used to be bad.
Yeah.
And we celebrate it. I can now joke with the worst students that, hey guys, remember, he was the worst student. And he's sitting there proud because I've got, the 5 examples across the board in front of the class. And I'm saying, look where he is now. Like,
and
and
you're setting the students for life. And this is like building their confidence before the age of 18 is wonderful. Like you're equipping the students with wonderful skills that are necessary.
And just that sense of and recognizing that, hey, maybe I can do this. Maybe any of us can do this, and we can get there. It's difficult because I'm really now looking at ways to sort of not backtrack, but try and blend in more of the content, more of the topics, and bring that in. So as they get to a certain point, I'm saying, right, now look at this. But it's tricky because you really don't want to lose that momentum, because all they now want to do is come in and get better. It's like and it's almost like it's a difficult one, because the traditional approach about wanting to feel like as a teacher, wanting to teach them this and expose them to this and show them this, and it's tempting because you feel like you're doing a good job as a teacher and you're ticking things off, but but actually too often it looks like to me that too often a lot of those topics become just a distraction. It's just, oh, we're doing another topic and everyone's doing the same topic, and yes, just more schoolwork, you know. Part of that problem I have with students not wanting to go to school is that school originally, historically, was set up as if it was a place of work. So you're going to work. If you're a student, it feels very much like I'm going to work. And like all the adults, I'd rather have a day off work. I don't, you know.
Yeah.
So I'm desperately trying to just push and push and push the fact that no, it's not work. We're not. I don't care. I almost don't care what you're doing as long as you know you're getting better. So as long as I'm happy you're getting better, then you can do it your way, and we're getting. But you must be getting better. You know. Yeah. So yeah, I do a lot of posting and writing on the recently on. I don't want to go into. I don't want to go into it because it gets dark, but the sort of darker history of why we do what we do, and examinations, and it's pretty. Yeah.
And have you found a form of assessment for all this work, for a form that you measure, a tool maybe, or you just record what the outcomes and move on?
Well, I mean, I would argue that maybe in art, it's as I said to all my staff a week ago when I was showcasing it. It is a bit easier in art. It's kind of quite easy for even an outsider to see that one's better than that one normally. So it's a bit tricky, but I'll use that as a launch pad to talk about New Zealand education, because it's been an interesting journey, because about 20 years ago, almost exactly, New Zealand went through a review and launched a new approach to assessment for university entrance, high school graduation, and then they went through in 2007 a curriculum review and launched a new curriculum, and the curriculum was very brief and very open and very sort of aspirational around dispositions and skills, rather than being a fixed syllabus of topics to teach. New Zealand schools are expected to very much contextualize those themes and those dispositions and those skills and to locally, so that it makes more sense to the students. And assessment, even across all of schooling, was changed to a leveling system for the student. So instead of grades for work, you're much more like a martial art, where you are leveling up in each subject area. And so effectively, like martial arts, you start on white belt, and you all the way through your schooling, you move through to yellow belt and green belt and blue belt, as it were. We just call them curriculum level 3, 4, and 5. But the idea of the system is that over a longer period of time, say it could even be 6 months, teachers, as we're now doing a lot more in my school, are gathering evidence. It means it frees the teacher up just to do some wonderful things, wonderful projects, explore some things, and in that work, you then gather a bit like a portfolio. You're just gathering observing evidence of how a student is performing across all of that work and all of that output. So at the end of a 6-month period, we then in my school will then sit down with a student. It will be, the student has to be aware of their level as well, and the idea is that you then say, yes, you are now, you're performing now at level 4, and for level 5 you just need to do this and do this, and so you'll continue. Again, our system, it sort of backs me up and says that yes, it's meant to be a leveling up system, but the truth of the situation in New Zealand is that they laid it all out on paper, and on paper we were one of the most progressive systems in the world, and we were being visited, and it was as a country, and everything was great. But the government, or the Ministry of Education, didn't do the best job at change management. The whole, how do you get thousands and thousands of teachers to change their whole way of thinking and their whole way of operating? and there wasn't enough support, and so not enough schools have really got on board with that sense of personal leveling up. And there's a lot of schools still marking work and still grading work and things like that. So there's some fantastic schools in New Zealand who've really charged ahead, but there's still a lot of schools that have struggled, and it's just through a lack of change management and support
So
for schools.
you feel now the responsibility falls on the shoulders of the leaders or on the teachers themselves? Like they have to.
Yeah, well, I mean, the upside of the New Zealand system is that you've got all this flexibility, and the schools have a lot of flexibility. We have autonomous schools; they're not government controlled. We have as it were inspectors every few years, but we are autonomous. We can do what we want. Various schools New Zealand schools, all the public schools can be very different, and still do enough to uphold that national curriculum with those aspirations and dispositions and things. But I've forgotten where I was going with that.
So the national curriculum is like a checklist, not like a syllabus that has to be followed by everybody.
No, it's I mean, yes, for example, our maths teachers do have a separate section on a website and separate documentation around, of course, all the core maths concepts and all the core maths topics and everything. But in terms of what schools must do, the national curriculum for maths is 3/4 of a page, because it talks about students being confident in mathematical thinking and mathematical reasoning, and there's a whole load of really broad ideas around that we expect students to be able to sort of handle life and use maths to help handle life and think mathematically. And so it's quite broad, so it only fills 3/4 of a page, and as long as you can, as a New Zealand school, argue that clearly your maths program does that, then you're not gonna be asked to change.
And then the math teacher will have to do their own research and set their own plan.
Yeah. So the downside is it asks, and this is where the change management has had a problem, is that they are asking a lot of you. Get freedom, but you also get the workload. So it's a big trade-off. To be honest, we've got a Conservative government coming in who's come in like about a year ago, and they're sort of wanting to go more old school and start talking about a fixed syllabus for all. And I have to say that it's getting a lot of pushback from teachers and parents. Although teachers have this workload of making all these decisions and almost dreaming up how they're going to do things, the idea that English teachers are going to be told which books they can hand to students, even if it's a list you can choose from, is getting a lot of pushback. They're not happy.
Okay.
We're a bicultural country, and so we're quite, with our wonderful Treaty of Waitangi, and so it's quite a unique setup in New Zealand where you've got a rare situation where there is an agreement between the British Empire, as it was, and the indigenous population, and so we're quite conscious of being culturally responsive in this country, as it's an expectation that, and so so with those sorts of considerations, it's a difficult route to go down if you want to start writing a fixed syllabus and saying everyone must do this, because there's a culture in this country of being able to respect people's culture, or whatever it is, and allow them to explore things through their own lens and their own understanding. So it's, in that sense, it's very progressive.
That's an important insight. And you have written a book, right? What is the book about?
Quite a few years ago, yep, nearly 10 years ago, I got asked by an American group to. I was presenting in the States, and some of my presentations were on the New Zealand system, because it just sounded wild to Americans. Like no, schools allowed to not do any testing, getting to university without doing an exam if you're that way inclined.
That's
Um,
something the outsourcing, exporting.
yeah.
Yeah,
It sort of very easily blew American minds. So I was
yeah,
presenting on that, and so this lady approached me and said, "I work for this group, and we're starting to publish books, and we'd love to have you write a book on all this crazy stuff." Um, and again, what made me passionate about it was having come from the UK. I think I benefited from the fact that to homegrown Kiwis, they'd sort of grown up with it and seen the development, and it was all quite natural to me. Coming from the UK, it was exciting and mind blowing. And I was looking at Kiwis saying, "Do you realize what you've got here? This is amazing."
yeah.
So that's why I was presenting on it, and so yeah, I wrote a book covering. It's a bit outdated now, but it covers those key concepts of the flexibility and their desire to ensure that more learners were represented, and the way that learners like to output their thinking, and how some students are simply better at speaking than they are at writing essays, and so we have a high school graduation system that says if you're that way inclined, you can gather up these credits. It's a standard based system that where you get credits for passing standards. And in one school, you can do that because you've made a documentary, and in another school, you can write an essay, and they will both be submitted for those credits. And as long as they tick the boxes for that standard, and you prove that you understand that and you can do that, then it can be a documentary or an essay. So, and then you can get enough credits through those in-house projects, that technically you can still get to many, like all the universities in New Zealand, without sitting an exam.
That's definitely something everybody should pick from you. And if you were asked to write another book now from like your European friends or your American friends, what would it be about?
I think it would start with, I mean, there are many books in this sort of area. I am just fascinated um, with the desire for learning, and how could schools rethink the whole experience of the day, so that students might want to go along and thrive off that the natural desire to learn. We do love finding stuff out, and all humans, like to some extent you could argue that TikTok is so popular because people love seeing like crazy things, amazing things.
It
And
was
yes, it's only 6 seconds, and yes, it's designed to be addictive. And you're right, I'm not advocating the TikTok bit at all. And but that natural desire that natural curiosity to see things and find out things, and just that terrible thought that schools do a very good job at systematically, killing that curiosity. And as
yeah,
Ken Robinson said 20 years ago.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
so that's a driver, and then as part of that, definitely the whole like New Zealand angle versus and my angle, and the science of learning, and some of that, and on kind of assessment and measurement, and the pushback, and the move away from making school feel like you're just there to be measured, which is
Mm.
what it was. Like I've said, it was historically it was set up to do that. Um, I
Nobody would be able to sustain that anyway. Like if we were to go to work every day to be measured, we wouldn't be
I
able
know.
to. Yeah.
No,
No.
you're issued work that you often have no say in, and then on top of that, you're also measured. You're also judged. and we wonder why kids don't want to go to school. I mean, my story recently, not my school, but a New Zealand school where they had to, the principal wanted to announce that they had to close tomorrow. They had to close the next day because they had a scheduled power cut. They were having maintenance and there wasn't going to be any power in the school. So, but she made the mistake of announcing over the tannoy that the school was closing tomorrow, and the cheers and the screams and the hugs and the emotion everyone was so excited that nobody heard the reason why the school was closing. And so everyone, I met a student from the school, and she knew that the school was not open tomorrow, but didn't know why, because the happy emotion. And what amazes me about that is that it includes the highest performers. My own daughters, for whatever reason, it's certainly not me, have done very well in their schooling. They generally get top grades in everything. They're very sciencey, and they both rejoice if they when they didn't have to go to school, and they in the final year, my elder, who's now at university, but my elder daughter, Mr. just chose to spend a lot of days at home rather than go to school because she could get a lot more work done at home. And so when your best students that are getting the top grades, the ones you would think would love the system, when they too are wanting to be at home and not wanting to be there, I think we've gone really wrong. Exactly. And my daughters went to a very sought after school, like a very good school. So
I think these high performing students carry a heavier burden because they have to pull their weight, and everybody, to make it happen in class, and they bring this responsibility in class. And it makes sense to me to be relieved when there is no school, because it's the burden of the measurement and the assessment, but the burden of bringing the whole responsibility of making the class work today and for another day. Okay. And if you were to speak to a bunch of leaders now, like in a conference or in a round table, what would be your top tip? And let's say they're leaders not from New Zealand, so they've never seen what you're seeing. How would you bring them to see what you're seeing?
It's tricky because I would say I'm fortunate to be in New Zealand and we'd be working within this system. So because I understand the pressures of other countries' systems and the sort of more traditional standardized assessment and things. So it's a difficult one. I do those contradictions. Schools are full of contradictions. And the difficulties around privilege, but I think if something that's universal would be a lot of. I'm a bit of a recent fan of Dylan Wiliam in the UK. Partly because he also sits in the middle between the progressives and the conservatives. He's very loved by the conservatives. So I quite like using his stuff, and he lays down some very challenging ideas around, like marking, like don't mark work. You've got a fairly traditional presenter talking about with all this research and all this studies, and he's saying don't do marking because the traditional teacher marking, where you go home and you take it all home to be marked, the delay causes so many problems in the learning. And it's shown in studies that no matter how many days it takes for you to get through that marking and bring it back to class, they will have done so much other stuff in the meantime, that the studies show that even if you get it back to them quite quickly, that there's no reaction to the feedback or grades. So by most. So amazing sort of alternatives to marking, where like in my classroom, we've got this formative assessment, feed forward. I don't have to do any marking at home. I don't have to because I now realize that the science says don't take any marking home. Then the same science says don't grade. No grades, no scores. And if you watch, I highly recommend, if I was going to recommend one thing, it's to find Dylan Williams' short videos on YouTube and just watch them, because he's backed up with lots of studies and lots of confirmation and proof that says you mustn't use grades and scores. You know, a high grade means that they don't need to read any feedback because they got a good score. A low grade means that you don't want to read the feedback because you got a low score. And we've got, you know, I've seen examples recently where, you know, 17 out of 20 in a math score. The research shows that most students won't look at the 3 they got wrong, because 17 out of 20 is good. And so his example is a math teacher in London who started saying, right, it's not working, because of those reasons, and but I want them to react to, you know, the feedback, to the thing. So she started giving back maths tests with just the number that you've got wrong without telling you which ones. So it was a matter of, so with your friend, you got 3 wrong, she got 5 wrong. So now you got to work out which ones are wrong.
Interesting.
You know? And so that meant it completely turned it on its head, because rather than good or bad scores, you just ignore them and move on, which the research shows does happen. It turned it into only an action. It turned it into something that you had to, you know, at the next task. So no marking, no grading, no scores, and I've got a big thing, like working in New Zealand. I've got a big thing against exams. I think exams they were part of that in your sort of initial eugenic history of schools around just confirming who was already good and who was already bad. And they've never made any sense, you know. Every country has got many students that live in cars, extreme poverty, living in cars, coming to school. Most people in the school don't know that student lives in a car. There's no place to study, there's no Wi-Fi, there's no laptop. And they go into an exam and sit next to a boy who has his own bedroom, his own laptop, has had 5 years private tuition, and has educated parents who are very confident to help him. And our system says that is a fair test, and it is an equal and fair test, and therefore the results of that exam are meaningful because it's a fair test and they have equal opportunity, and it's a nonsense. It's you know, around the world we've got 80 years of data that says rich people beat poor people and girls beat boys, and we know that before we write the questions. You know, before you've even written the questions of your exam, your national exam, I can tell you that the girls will beat the boys and rich will beat poor. And therefore we know with 80 years of data that the exam is not measuring ability. And so at its core, why is any country or any school doing a standardized exam? Because we're drowning in evidence to say that we shouldn't, and it makes no sense. You know, you're like, I show in one of my slides when I'm teaching teachers is to show, you know, 100-meter track, 100-meter running track, and just to think that if you had starting positions and lane 5 started at the 50-meter mark and always did and always won the race, we would think it was a nonsense. We would stop running those races. There's no point running a race if lane 5 is starting at 50 meters and always wins, because you think, well, of course they're always going to win. But those 5 lanes are those, you know, 5 examples of privilege that one student can have over another. Yeah. So if we won't run that race because it seems nonsense, why would exams? So.
And that's why underprivileged students flip the board so quickly, like 3rd grade, 4th grade, they just flip the board.
They know it. They know it's stacked against them very early on. They know, for example, in a lot of countries, you're saying, hey, do schoolwork, because at the end of the day, most schools are still sort of angling towards students going to university. That's the sort of benchmark for most schools. But a lot of these kids know that university is expensive and I'm never going to be able to afford it.
So why try?
So I might only be in grade 5, but why do I need to try? Because I can't go. So.
Yeah.
And that changes their attitude from every day from that from then on. So
the rest of their life.
and
Wow.
so in those terms, all measurement, all comparison and measurement in school is a nonsense. And so that's why I've switched to this sort of mastery program, and so saying, look, it doesn't matter who you are, we're all just going to get better.
Keep spreading the word, Richard, because what you're saying is really powerful and useful for all of us. Just never stop thinking about it. And
Yeah.
you will be honing what you're saying along the way. And this conversation could go on and on forever.
Mm.
So for this final part of the podcast, I have this book hack, the trick I do with my guests.
Okay.
Yeah, so I do have a list of my favorite, let's say, books. I try to renew them, but I just add, I don't remove. So this, if you can pick one
Yeah.
of the books, and
I
I
have
will
to put my
explain.
glasses on here. Yeah.
Can you read? Otherwise, just
Yeah.
tell me the number of the
I
book.
can read most of them. I
Okay.
mean, yeah, I haven't read it, but I'd be keen. I mean, am I recommending a book, or am I picking one to?
You're picking.
Because Hidden Potential sounds like my kind of thing, and I like Adam Grant's stuff. So
Hidden Potential. I'm finishing this one now. So give me a page number.
okay, let's go for a nice 200.
200.
I think by about page 200, you're getting into the meat of a book, I think. So
Yeah, there is some juice there. Okay, 200. And the line?
the line, we're doing line. Let's go for unlucky number 13.
13. Okay. So I'm going to read what's around the line 13, and then we'll talk about how this resonates with you, what you're doing in your life.
Sounds good.
Line 13 is in the middle of like a note in here. So I'll start reading. I'll read the whole note. I would like to increase my chances during the next selection process by correcting or improving any deficiencies that I may be unaware of, but were discovered in my application package. I would therefore deeply appreciate any feedback you can provide regarding the status of my application, the letter of consideration it was given, and any comments, if possible, made by reviewers concerning my applications. A special thank you for taking time off your schedule to fulfill one of what must be thousands of requests.
Okay.
How does this make?
So my first thought is it's a common go-to I have is that it's teachers. It makes me think about teachers. I dream of teachers operating classrooms as teams and opening up to say, I want every lesson, every time I'm with you, I want feedback. I want your ideas. Like, if this isn't working for you, or we can make this better, then let's do this as a team. And I will be open to your ideas. We will try them out. And this is for you, and it should be partly by you. And that way, it's always going to work better. And even before the suggestions start, by opening yourself up like that to a class, you do get a lot more buy-in. They feel like you actually are much more authentic, much more genuinely interested in their success, because you want their feedback to build a better classroom. So teachers using the students as a resource for what they should and shouldn't be doing. The one I advertised to my staff this year was the keep what is it? Keep, stop, start. So I just did a Google form for my kids, and it's anonymous, and it just says, "Hey, sir, keep doing this, stop
Mm,
doing that, and start doing this."
beautiful.
And
Beautiful.
it's great fun.
Yeah.
As long as you're open to it, and you can just have a bit of fun with it, and brace yourself for some comedy answers and things. But it's very useful, you know.
Beautiful, beautiful, and very useful for every educator to do that. Like, highly recommended, right? Google
Yeah,
Forms, anonymous, and you
yeah,
have all this feedback from your students without even asking for it. Like, they will
yeah.
give you feedback for sure.
And there's definitely always things we could always stop doing
Yeah,
that will help.
most definitely, most definitely. And my students have taught me the most beautiful things about teaching and learning. So
Mm,
research hasn't taught me so much, and studying hasn't taught me so much as my students themselves from
yeah,
getting and reading their minds. Okay, thank you so much, Richard, for this conversation. It was wonderful. I really enjoyed learning from you.
that's been
And
great. Great conversation. Great questions. Great, yeah, it's great topics. It's what I sadly love doing so much, and spend way too
yeah,
much time writing
yeah.
and reading.